He was already walking away, his shadow stretched long against the polished floor, and I was still holding the ring. My hand trembled, but I couldn't let it drop. Not yet. Not while the echo of his footsteps beat louder than my own heart. That's how it ended, or at least that's how it looked to anyone who walked by. But endings always begin somewhere else. I was Maya, 28 years old, daughter of a schoolteacher and a mechanic who believed in hard work more than sweet words. I learned early to fight for myself, to smile when I had to, and to keep my secrets tucked deep. Love wasn't supposed to be part of the plan. Not like this. Not with him. We met at a party I almost didn't attend. It was loud, the kind of place where laughter didn't sound real, just forced through the music. He found me in the corner, staring at my glass as though it could solve my loneliness. Daniel. Tall, calm, eyes that held the kind of promises every girl wants to believe. He asked if I hated crowds as much as he did. I laughed. That was enough. That laugh changed my whole life. He chased me fast, too fast, but I didn't complain. For once, someone looked at me as if I mattered, as if my quietness was worth his time. Flowers on my doorstep, calls at midnight, sudden trips to places I had never seen. He made me feel like I was living inside a dream I never thought I could afford. He said he couldn't imagine life without me. I believed him. The wedding was like something from a magazine. Lights, music, and my dress flowing like clouds around my feet. I wanted to hold on to that day forever. People clapped when we kissed, but what I remember most was how his hand felt steady in mine. In that moment, I trusted him more than I trusted myself. Marriage should have been a safe place, but sometimes safety is just another word for silence. The house was big, filled with everything money could buy, yet I heard the emptiness in every room. He worked late, traveled often, and when he came home, he smiled without really seeing me. I kept telling myself it was normal, that love was bigger than absence. But each night the bed grew colder. I tried to fill the silence with purpose. While he lived in boardrooms and business dinners, I studied law in secret, poring over books while the city slept. It gave me a sense of control, a weapon hidden in plain sight. I told myself it was for the future, for us, for stability. But part of me already knew. Love shouldn't require preparation for war. The cracks showed in small ways. Missed calls. Strange perfume on his clothes. Laughter meant for someone else. When I looked into his eyes, I found shadows that didn't belong to me. Still, I stayed. I smiled through family dinners, held his arm at public events, played the perfect wife. But deep inside, I was keeping score. Every secret I uncovered was a brick in the wall I was building between us. And yet, when I found out I was pregnant, hope pushed its way back into my chest. I imagined a fresh start, a softer version of him, a home filled with the sound of tiny feet. For a brief moment, I believed love could be repaired, that the child growing inside me could be the glue that fixed everything broken. But love, like glass, doesn't mend the way you want it to. It cuts, it scars, it reminds you of every crack. And even as I held the news close to my heart, I sensed the storm waiting just beyond the horizon. The day I told him about the baby should have been a memory I cherished forever. I pictured his eyes softening, his arms pulling me close, both of us laughing like children in the middle of the kitchen. Instead, his smile froze before it reached his eyes. He kissed my forehead, whispered that he was happy, then excused himself for a call that lasted the rest of the night. I sat alone at the table, staring at two plates, one untouched, one half-eaten. That was the first time the baby and I ate dinner without him, but it wasn't the last. I wanted to believe his distance was fear, not rejection. I told myself men take time to adjust, that he just needed to catch his breath before stepping into fatherhood. But the signs were too sharp to ignore. He came home later, sometimes not at all. His phone, once left lying carelessly on the counter, now never left his pocket. He smelled of cologne I didn't buy. Once, when I leaned in to kiss him, he turned his head and laughed as if my lips were a joke. That laugh broke something inside me, something that would never heal the same. Still, I carried my belly with pride. I talked to the baby every night, whispering promises I wished someone had made to me. I told my child they would never feel invisible, never feel second to anyone's ambition or lies. In the stillness, I imagined a future where I was strong enough to stand alone if I had to. Maybe I was already practicing for the day it would no longer be a choice. The breaking point came quietly, not with a fight but with a silence so heavy it drowned me. He forgot the doctor's appointment where we would hear our baby's heartbeat together. I sat in the room alone, listening to the rhythm of new life while staring at the empty chair beside me. The doctor congratulated me. I forced a smile. But in that moment, I decided I would no longer wait for him to show up. That night, as he showered, I searched his jacket pocket. The receipt wasn't for dinner with clients. It was for a necklace, engraved with a name that wasn't mine. My hands shook, not from surprise but from confirmation. I had suspected it all along. Now I had proof. I looked at myself in the mirror, my belly round, my eyes red. I should have screamed, but instead I laughed, quiet, bitter, and cold. Love had ended long before I admitted it. What remained now was survival. He thought he was the only one who could play games in the dark. He had no idea I had been studying, preparing, building something he would never see coming. That night, as the water still ran in the bathroom, I placed my hand on my stomach and whispered a vow. Not just to my child, but to myself. I would not be a woman abandoned. I would not let him walk away with everything and leave me broken. If he wanted to play betrayal, I would master the rules. And when the time came, I would be the one holding the final card. He stepped out of the shower, smiling as if nothing was wrong. I met his eyes, calm and steady, and smiled back. He thought I was blind. He thought I was weak. He didn't know the woman he had married. He didn't know what I was becoming. The day I told him about the baby should have been a memory I cherished forever. I pictured his eyes softening, his arms pulling me close, both of us laughing like children in the middle of the kitchen. Instead, his smile froze before it reached his eyes. He kissed my forehead, whispered that he was happy, then excused himself for a call that lasted the rest of the night. I sat alone at the table, staring at two plates, one untouched, one half-eaten. That was the first time the baby and I ate dinner without him, but it wasn't the last. I wanted to believe his distance was fear, not rejection. I told myself men take time to adjust, that he just needed to catch his breath before stepping into fatherhood. But the signs were too sharp to ignore. He came home later, sometimes not at all. His phone, once left lying carelessly on the counter, now never left his pocket. He smelled of cologne I didn't buy. Once, when I leaned in to kiss him, he turned his head and laughed as if my lips were a joke. That laugh broke something inside me, something that would never heal the same. Still, I carried my belly with pride. I talked to the baby every night, whispering promises I wished someone had made to me. I told my child they would never feel invisible, never feel second to anyone's ambition or lies. In the stillness, I imagined a future where I was strong enough to stand alone if I had to. Maybe I was already practicing for the day it would no longer be a choice. The breaking point came quietly, not with a fight but with a silence so heavy it drowned me. He forgot the doctor's appointment where we would hear our baby's heartbeat together. I sat in the room alone, listening to the rhythm of new life while staring at the empty chair beside me. The doctor congratulated me. I forced a smile. But in that moment, I decided I would no longer wait for him to show up. That night, as he showered, I searched his jacket pocket. The receipt wasn't for dinner with clients. It was for a necklace, engraved with a name that wasn't mine. My hands shook, not from surprise but from confirmation. I had suspected it all along. Now I had proof. I looked at myself in the mirror, my belly round, my eyes red. I should have screamed, but instead I laughed, quiet, bitter, and cold. Love had ended long before I admitted it. What remained now was survival. He thought he was the only one who could play games in the dark. He had no idea I had been studying, preparing, building something he would never see coming. That night, as the water still ran in the bathroom, I placed my hand on my stomach and whispered a vow. Not just to my child, but to myself. I would not be a woman abandoned. I would not let him walk away with everything and leave me broken. If he wanted to play betrayal, I would master the rules. And when the time came, I would be the one holding the final card. He stepped out of the shower, smiling as if nothing was wrong. I met his eyes, calm and steady, and smiled back. He thought I was blind. He thought I was weak. He didn't know the woman he had married. He didn't know what I was becoming. He didn't notice when I started locking the study door at night. He thought I was asleep, curled under blankets, waiting for him to stumble home. Instead, I sat with law books spread across the desk, a lamp burning low, my swollen ankles propped on a chair. The house was silent except for the sound of my pen scratching against paper. Contracts, property division, spousal rights, cold words that gave me more comfort than his empty promises. By day, I played the role he wanted. The perfect wife. Smiling at his business partners, laughing at jokes that stung, walking through boutiques with credit cards he tossed at me like candy. But by night, I was a student again, stubborn and hungry. I memorized cases, highlighted judgments, whispered paragraphs to myself until the words felt like weapons. He thought he was clever, but I was learning how to cut sharper than his lies. The house he bought for us gleamed with wealth, but it had no soul. Marble floors, glass walls, endless rooms where my voice echoed back at me. Sometimes I'd pause in the hall just to hear my own footsteps, to remind myself I was still there. At dinner, I cooked meals for two but ate alone, pushing food around the plate, staring at the seat across from me. His absence grew heavier than his presence ever had. Pregnancy slowed me down, but it didn't stop me. My belly stretched, my body ached, but I studied harder, determined to prepare for the storm I knew was coming. Some nights I cried into the pillow, whispering to the baby inside me. I told them they were the reason I kept moving, the reason I wouldn't collapse. Other nights, I laughed bitterly, asking if they could hear the silence of a house filled with everything except love. The more he drifted, the more I sharpened. He returned home with excuses that didn't need explaining. I could smell her perfume before he kissed me goodnight. His shirts carried traces of lipstick he never saw in the mirror. He started leaving gifts, bracelets, dresses, flowers delivered to the door, as if wrapping betrayal in paper made it easier to swallow. I accepted them with a smile, tucked them away in drawers, and counted them like evidence. The breaking point wasn't dramatic. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I waited in the clinic, one hand on my belly, listening to the baby's heartbeat fill the room. The doctor smiled and asked if the father would be joining. I nodded, but my throat tightened when I looked at the empty chair. He never walked in. He never called. The sound of my baby's heart was pure and strong, but all I felt was hollow. That was the moment I decided. He had left me alone in the one place I needed him most. I would never forgive him for that. When I got home, he was laughing into his phone. I froze in the doorway, watching his shoulders shake with joy he hadn't shown me in months. He ended the call, kissed my cheek, and said he had a late meeting. His jacket slipped from his chair. A receipt poked out of the pocket. I pulled it free when he wasn't looking. Jewelry. A necklace, engraved. Not my name. Not even close. My hands shook, but my heart was calm. I didn't need to imagine anymore. The truth was ink on paper. I walked into the bathroom, stared at myself in the mirror, and whispered, "It's over." Not out loud, not to him, just to me. Love had ended, and what remained was survival. From that night, I stopped waiting. I stopped begging. I stopped hoping. I became something he couldn't recognize. Polite smiles, careful words, eyes that saw everything but gave nothing back. He thought I was weak. He thought I would crumble. He didn't see the woman he had created, patient, wounded, and dangerous. As the months dragged on, I held my belly and made promises to my child. You'll never feel small. You'll never be left behind. You'll never wonder if you're enough. Each vow hardened me, carved me into steel. My body hurt, my back ached, my nights were restless, but my resolve grew with every kick inside me. Then labor came, sharp and sudden, pulling me out of sleep like a knife. I called his name once, twice, but the house was silent. He wasn't there. He was never there. I clutched the wall, teeth biting down on screams, dragging myself to the door. My bag was ready, packed weeks ago. I had always known I would walk this road alone. The hospital lights blinded me, nurses rushing, voices asking questions I barely heard. Did I have someone to call? Yes. But not him. I gave them the lawyer's number, the man who had listened when I whispered the truth in late-night meetings. He promised he'd be ready when I was. They wheeled me into the delivery room, sweat soaking my gown, pain ripping me apart. I held the rails, gasping, whispering to the child inside me, "Hold on. Just a little longer." The door opened, and I braced for his face. For Daniel. For the man who should have been there. But it wasn't him. A man in a gray suit stepped forward, a folder tucked under his arm. His eyes met mine, calm and unshaken, as if he had been waiting for this exact moment. He leaned down, close enough for only me to hear, and whispered, "Are you ready?" The contraction hit hard, forcing a scream from my chest, but I didn't look away from his eyes. Because in that moment, I knew this wasn't just the day my child would be born. This was the day Daniel's world would begin to fall apart. And I was the one who would light the match. The baby came into the world while thunder rolled outside. My screams mixed with the storm, my body shaking, sweat burning my skin. When I finally heard the cry, sharp and alive, everything else fell away. For a moment, there was no betrayal, no lawyer, no secrets. Just me and the tiny miracle pressed against my chest. His little hand curled around my finger, and I swore the pain was worth it. But even as I kissed his forehead, I knew this was not the end. It was the beginning of a war I had been preparing for. The lawyer stood in the corner, patient, almost invisible to everyone but me. When the nurses left, he came forward and placed the folder on the table. The sound of the paper hitting wood was louder than the storm outside. I looked at it, then at my child, and finally at him. He didn't need to explain. I had been waiting for this. I reached for the pen with trembling hands, my body weak but my mind razor-sharp. My signature marked the first strike. Divorce papers. Custody demands. Evidence stacked neatly in place. When Daniel finally arrived, his shirt half-buttoned, hair too neat for someone rushing, I was already sitting up in bed with my baby in my arms. His eyes widened when he saw the lawyer. He tried to mask it with a smile, but his face betrayed him. He stepped closer, opening his mouth to speak, but the lawyer cut him off with a single sentence. "You've been served." The color drained from his face. For the first time in months, I saw him shaken. He glanced at me, searching for softness, for weakness, but I only rocked the baby gently and stared back. His voice cracked as he tried to speak my name. I said nothing. Silence had become my sharpest weapon. Later, when the room emptied and only shadows remained, I thought about how I had gotten here. Flashbacks replayed like fragments of a movie, nights in the library, endless notes, whispers to the lawyer about accounts, transfers, hidden assets. Every lie Daniel told had left a trail, and I had followed each one quietly, patiently. I gathered receipts, tracked dates, built a case so tight not even his money could buy him out of it. He thought I was just a wife too tired to fight. He never imagined I was a storm waiting in silence. Word spread faster than I expected. By the time I left the hospital, reporters were already outside. Flashes blinded me as I stepped into the car, my baby wrapped in a soft blanket. They shouted his name, shouted mine, through questions that cut like stones. I kept my head high, my face calm, my silence louder than their noise. Daniel, standing behind me, tried to block the cameras, but it was too late. The world had caught the scent of blood. At home, I found myself in a house that no longer belonged to me in spirit. Every wall reminded me of nights I had cried alone. I walked through the rooms slowly, holding my baby close, whispering that we wouldn't stay here forever. This was just a battlefield, not a home. I stopped in the living room where the lawyer spread out documents across the table. Bank statements, property titles, messages he thought were hidden, proof of every betrayal, proof that would burn his empire down to ashes. Daniel tried to talk to me that night. His words spilled out, apologies, excuses, promises I had heard before. He reached for my hand, but I pulled away. My eyes didn't leave his. "You left me alone when it mattered," I said quietly. His mouth opened, but no sound came. He knew there was nothing he could say to erase the truth. The days that followed were chaos. Headlines screamed his name. Business partners backed away. Friends who once laughed at our table disappeared. I watched him unravel piece by piece, anger simmering behind his polished smile. He tried to intimidate me, tried to remind me of the life he gave me, but his power was crumbling, and he knew it. Still, he didn't understand how deep I had gone. He didn't know I had copied files from his laptop, saved messages he thought deleted, recorded calls he didn't know I overheard. Each secret was a weapon, and I carried them like bullets in a gun. He thought the worst had already come, but the truth was, I was only getting started. The night before our first court date, I stood by the window with my baby asleep in my arms. The city lights flickered below, a million lives moving while mine stood still. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who laughed at his jokes, who believed in his promises, who dreamed of a simple life filled with love. She was gone now. In her place was someone harder, sharper, unshakable. Behind me, Daniel's voice broke the silence. "You'll regret this, Maya." I turned slowly, met his eyes, and smiled. A smile that carried every secret I still hadn't revealed. He thought he had seen the worst of me. He hadn't seen anything yet. Because tomorrow, in front of the world, I was going to show him exactly who he married. He once told me the world would never believe me over him. He said money made truth bend, that power erased proof. But the morning of our first court date, I walked into that courtroom holding not just evidence, but a newborn child. The air was heavy, every seat filled with strangers waiting for a scandal. My hands didn't shake. My voice didn't falter. When the judge asked if I had anything to present, I nodded to my lawyer. One by one, the files, recordings, and messages spilled into the open. Gasps echoed. Reporters scribbled like mad. And Daniel. He sat there pale, jaw tight, eyes burning with rage he couldn't show. That was the moment he realized money couldn't buy silence anymore. Outside, the cameras swarmed us. Questions flew like arrows. Why now? Did you know about the fraud? What's your next move? I kept my baby close, answering none of them. Silence was more powerful than words. The people watching didn't need explanations. They saw everything in my eyes. Do you ever wonder what it feels like to stop being invisible? To have the same people who dismissed you suddenly hang on your every move? Let me tell you, it's fire and ice all at once. Days turned into weeks of legal battles. Each session pulled more secrets out of the shadows. Offshore accounts, bribes, contracts dripping with lies. His empire wasn't a castle, it was a house of cards. And I was flicking them down, one at a time. Still, he tried to fight back. He sent messages, called in favors, even tried to play the victim on television. But the world had already seen enough. Once trust is gone, no amount of charm or money can glue it back together. The night the verdict came, the city outside the courthouse hummed with noise. Daniel lost not just the case but the grip he had over everything. Custody leaned in my favor. His companies faced investigation. And I walked out holding my son, head high, with strangers clapping like I had done the impossible. But it wasn't luck. It was years of quiet preparation. Have you ever kept a secret so long that when it finally came out, you felt both relief and rage? That was me. But here's what no one expected. I didn't stop there. With the same fire that carried me through the courtroom, I turned to something bigger. The documents, the evidence. I used them not just to protect myself, but to expose the systems that let men like him rise unchecked. Reporters started calling me a whistleblower, some called me a hero, others called me ruthless. I didn't care. For the first time, I wasn't living in his shadow. I was building something of my own. And then, just when I thought the dust had settled, he showed up. Not in a boardroom or a courtroom, but on my doorstep, late at night, looking nothing like the man I once knew. His suit was gone, his tie missing, his hair undone. He asked to see the baby. Against every instinct, I let him hold his son. For a few minutes, silence filled the room. His eyes softened, his arms cradled the child gently. Then he looked at me, voice low, almost broken. You won, Maya. You destroyed me. I should have felt triumph. Instead, I felt something harder to name. Pity. No. Closure, maybe. I told him the truth, the only truth left between us. You destroyed yourself. I just stopped covering for you. He blinked, tears threatening, but I didn't waver. I wasn't his wife anymore. I was the woman he had underestimated, and I would never let him forget it. Months later, I stood on a stage in Dallas. Cameras pointed, lights blinding, but this time the questions weren't about scandal. They were about the foundation I started, the one dedicated to women who had been silenced, controlled, or discarded. I spoke of change, of strength, of voices that mattered. My son was in the front row with my mother, both of them smiling. For once, my life wasn't about survival. It was about building. And I asked the crowd a question I'll ask you too. What would you do if the person who thought they broke you actually built the fire that made you unstoppable? 1 year later, the house that used to feel like a prison was gone. In its place was a small home filled with laughter, toys on the floor, warmth in every corner. I painted the nursery myself, stars across the ceiling like a map of hope. Every night, as I rocked my child to sleep, I remembered the woman I used to be, the one who stayed quiet, who accepted crumbs, who believed her worth was tied to someone else's approval. She was gone. In her place stood a mother, a fighter, a builder of legacies. Daniel still exists somewhere out there, a shadow of the man who once held everything. But he doesn't haunt me anymore. He doesn't own my story. If anything, he became the reason I found my voice. And that's the final twist, isn't it? The man who tried to erase me ended up making me unforgettable. So tell me, if you were in my shoes, would you have smiled too when the lawyer dropped those papers? Or would you have broken down in tears? Because I'll tell you this, sometimes the smile isn't about joy. Sometimes, it's the beginning of war. And in my war, I didn't just survive. I won.